Hi, everyone. And let me go through the questions, answers, and rationale for the second exam. Okay, here we go. So the first question is having to do with Jean, and she's admitted to the hospital with headache, stiff neck, but intact mental status. Now, the lab results reveal meningitis, um, an infection commonly associated with HIV, but she refuses to get tested for HIV. So, how should the clinical staff react? This question is about autonomy and about choices, and specifically consent. She was informed, but it is about consent. And so the fact that she has an intact mental status, she is not HIV positive. It's suspected, but testing can only be done and should only be done with the informed consent of the patient. And so it's irrelevant what the clinical staff, well, it's not irrelevant what they think. Now they can try and convince her, but if she adamantly refuses, she adamantly refuses. And so in the rationale, the idea of she has the autonomous right to make a decision and consent or the ability to dissent is also possible. Okay, so let's go to the second question. The second question has to do with Andrea Anderson. There was the short YouTube video on the Blackboard site. This is from a Washington Post story. Andrea was refused emergency contraception by a male pharmacist in Minnesota. But the question asks, what might have occurred if the case happened in Indiana? So first, you have to use your stuff, your notes, as I keep saying. And we discussed, that not all states have a provision for pharmacists to conscientiously object. Some states actually take a different stand, like New York, to suggest that a pharmacist has to be able to provide the prescription. Some states say they don't have to, they have to refer. So Indiana says nothing. And that's where you start. Because Indiana doesn't have any type of provision, there are actually two potential answers to this question. The pharmacist doesn't have to fill the prescription or refer her to another pharmacist or pharmacy, which is correct in Indiana. The pharmacist can also exercise an objection of conscience or not without penalty. So there are two potential answers here, but mainly stemming from the fact that Indiana doesn't have any type of regulation. And so because of that, it's really up to then the pharmacist to decide, which is this limbo position. As nothing, sorry about that. And now we head across the border in Illinois, and there's very stringent policies. So mentioning that, using the not so much the map, but the handout perhaps to bolster your argument is always a good idea. Okay, let's keep going. Number 3, a physician who believes abortion is always wrong may still remove the uterus of a pregnant woman, knowing the procedure will cause the death of the fetus. The woman is certain to die without the procedure. So what would the physician claim as his ethical rationale? We spoke about the principle of double effect. It actually comes from Catholic social teaching, Catholic doctrine. I think that when, and there's a number of examples, but in this case, when the mother's life is in jeopardy, in question, it's permissible to, in this case, remove the uterus from the pregnant woman. The pregnancy will be aborted, but the intention is to save the mother's life. And so really mentioning that in connection with the principle of double effect is makes the most sense. Question 4, Susan is Catholic. She personally objects to abortion, but she's a nurse who works in the emergency department. In the past year, she's assisted on 2 abortion cases, both occurring after rape. So what statement below represents Susan's ethical stance on abortion, which happens to be B, which is also one of your potential essay questions. So she's opposed to abortion. It says it right up here from an ethical perspective, but she still supports the law. She still supports the fact that it is, excuse me, it is a right. It is legal to have an abortion, not in all venues, obviously in her emergency department, more than likely a medical abortion. And so she still supports that, the fact that there's a law. And that statement really is foundational for this question. Okay, so let's keep going. Okay, so we have two potential questions here. And as I said in class, I'm going to continue giving you the question in advance. So let me just make a few general comments. Certainly the results of these essay questions were a little bit stronger, more defined than in the first exam. You really want to focus on an ethics theme, any ethics theme, and bolster that ethics theme with an example. And that example could come from anywhere. Now, when I mean anywhere, I mean from stuff that we have covered. Could be a reading, it could be a portion of a video, it could be a chart. So not something extra, something we've covered. And certainly with either question, I'm not at all looking for a specific answer. It doesn't really matter. Does the autonomous right of the pharmacist outweigh that of the patient? You could say yes or no. It's really the argument that you're making that exemplifies the ethics theme. What brings it home, though, is an example. And so each of the questions obviously here revolve around beginning of life. And again, second question, it doesn't really matter. You could say yes or no. It's about making the argument. Now, I made the case, or I mentioned that for the third exam, if you want to write on a piece of paper, write, as opposed to email me, potential responses to the next exam essay question, which you'll get in advance, I can certainly provide you guidance in terms of directions, but it needs to have a well-defined ethics theme, and go right for it. And then a very clear example. And you can say, for example, blah, blah, blah. Okay. If you have any specific questions about your short answer question for exam 2, just bring it to me and we'll talk about it. All right, number 6 has to do with Tim Roberts. But the question is this: some of his friends say at times that this physician does not follow his conscience when practicing. Why is that? So you want to look for a conflict, a contradiction here. Now, I will tell you that many of you in the individual exam chose B. He strongly supports the role of a county clinic and refers some of his patients to this clinic to receive RU46. RU46 is the abortifacient. The question is, what's the conflict here? What's the contradiction? He supports the role of a county clinic. Okay, that's one part of it, and refers some of his patients to this organization to receive RU46. That's a practice. So what's the conflict? Well, the answer is there doesn't seem to be a conflict here. And so if there's no conflict, then it's hard to make the case that he does or does not follow his conscience, because you're not really sure what the conflict is. So the answer is D. He is strongly opposed to abortion from a religious perspective. Okay, so we know where he stands. His physician practice partner, Dr. Susan Orr, does provide free samples of the morning after pill to her patients only. So what's the conflict? The conflict is that they're partners. Now, he does not provide the morning after pill. She does to her patients only, but he works in an environment with a partner that does it for her patients only. But that certainly leads to the potential that he doesn't follow his conscience. And so understanding sort of the bigger picture, it's not him, but he works in an environment. He works in an environment. So you think about, and a good way to approach this from the rationale perspective is think about the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare. It doesn't actually, that pertains to the hospital or the healthcare environment, doesn't pertain to people. So it's the entire environment that is saying, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll do, and this is what we won't do. It's irrelevant what you believe as a person. The entire environment follows these directives, these beliefs. And so there is no conflict. There is no objection of conscience when it comes to the ERD, because this is sort of the stance of the organization. All right, let's go to the last question, which is number 7. And this has to do with the in-class survey that we did on September 28th. The results, amazingly, as I say again, to this statement, do you agree with the pharmacists who refused to fill prescriptions for birth control, was 0 to 39, where all 39 of you who took the survey disagreed with the pharmacists. So what's the conclusion? And what can be drawn from this? There are 2 potential responses here. Again, the autonomy of the healthcare professional should not take precedence over the autonomy of the patient. You can really see that with a clear 0 to 39 vote. The other potential response is access to care, which is dispensation of birth control in any form, should take precedence, should supersede, should be a priority over the autonomy, the choices of the healthcare professional. So 2 potential answers, you can choose either one. Now, I will tell you, I'm not going to have 2 potential answers to most of the questions. It just sort of worked out this way. And I would guess in your favor. However, I do look pretty closely at the rationale. And if the rationale isn't there, then it's a problem. I'll just sort of conclude and say, develop your rationale. It doesn't have to be long, but my recommendation is just don't put statements in like law versus ethics, because that is just a statement and it doesn't really connect to whatever the response is. Okay, so I'm going to stop right here. At this point, just let me know if you, after you look at this, if you have any questions. I'd all be happy to go through it with you, but hopefully this was helpful. Thanks very much, everyone. Bye.